Welcome, everybody. Here we are for discussing with some of the authors this very interesting book, Contours of Feminist Political Ecology. It's a great occasion for all of us to discuss about how a feminist perspective can be adopted for discussing about climate change, ecofeminism, and so on. We do this with the editor of the book, but also author of some of the chapters, Wendy Harcourt, from The Hague, from ISS The Hague, and two of the authors in the book, Agostina Solera and Lilia Sol Cueva. Well, first of all, I thank all the three of them to be here with us, to have accepted our invitation. And I give immediately the floor to Wendy to introduce the idea of the book, the structure of the book, and whatever she would like to add. Thank you so much to all of you to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Marcella, for inviting us. We're very excited to be at the Minerva Lab. We hope you will also get excited about what we've done in this book, The Contours of Feminist Political Ecology. First of all, I'm going to start, and then Augustina and Lillian will follow. First, I'm going to explain briefly what is feminist political ecology before I go into the book. So maybe, Augustina, you could move to the next slide. So, what is feminist political ecology? Basically, I wouldn't say a discipline, I would say it's an approach to a whole range of things that draws on political ecology and ecofeminism. And its approach is to look at questions of power that determines people's unequal and differentiated access and control of resources in the household, the community, local, regional, and global scales. And it's concerned about environment, social equity, and social justice issues. So it's related to feminist political economics, but different from it, in that it's also providing a multi-scalar analysis of knowledge production, looking at gendered rights and responsibilities, the workings of power and politics in the use, access, and distribution of resources. And we do it really in the context of today's neoliberal economic growth. So in that sense, feminist political ecology is of course a field of study, but it's also about politics. It emphasizes the concerns about gender, bodies, and power, and it brings those things to its political and practical work. In this sense, we aim to expose and challenge the prevailing capitalist patriarchal ways of organizing and understanding socio-nature relations, and we also are engaged in creative ways to formulate and promote alternatives. So it's got a big, expansive idea of how to look at environmental justice and how to do it as feminists. For those of you who are more interested in, let's say, the academic side of it, let me mention that it's seeing these gender relations as intersectional, as dynamic, and how gender relations interact with ecological, technological, and political economic processes. But again, it does this, the research and practice, which is about transformation, particularly for women, but also other marginalized groups. And I would underline this, and you'll hear this as I talk about the chapters of the book, is that it promotes a feminist ethics of care. And it does so as part of a reimagining of post-capitalist alternatives that challenge the neoliberal forms of natural resource-based development. So I hope that gives you a sense of what feminist political ecology is. And now, if I could go to the next slide, I'll just explain the process of how we did this book. Because in this sense, we're trying to present the book not as a book. As you can see in the slide, you can download the book for free. We managed to get money from the EU project, which supported some of the chapters. Sorry, the whole book, but some of the authors who were PhDs. But what's important for us here is that we're looking at how we could create feminist knowledge through this book, reflecting on issues of care, on futures and decoloniality in different geographical contexts. And that's what we'll be sharing with you today. I should mention that the funding did come from the EU Marie Curie Horizon 2020 money as part of an innovative training network, which had around 40 emerging scholars and mentors. Money was given to produce 15 PhDs, but we did much more than that. We really wanted to open up research as both storytelling and activism through dialogues about how we wanted to imagine and build more just and sustainable otherwise worlds. So in that sense, the book as a process was created through all the dialogues that we did in the network. And also the book is written as a series of dialogues as we explore different topics that range from climate change and extractivism, body politics and health, decoloniality, degrowth, care, and community well-being. And in that sense, the dialogues were really about the ethics of doing feminist work inside and outside academe. And we tried to bring to life the importance of doing this reflexive research, aware of the situated historical, contemporary, and geopolitical contours of power. So we did a lot of this dialoguing, not with academics alone, but also with radical democracy movements, ecological democracy movements in India, Indonesia, and Nepal, with post-extractivist movements in Latin America, with community economies and degrowth movements in Europe, the US, Kenya, Canada, and Japan. And we were really looking for feminist stories of hope and solidarity and restoration amongst communities that are living and working to sustain human and ecosystems as they care for living worlds. So the book itself was created through these dialogues, which happened over 4 years. But in particular, we held these research training labs where we invited different people from outside the network to join the conversations. And we invited academics, advocates and activists, artists, and technical people. And in this sense, Lillian and Augustina, who are here with us today, were part of those dialogues within WeGo Network. And they were specifically part of the lab, although also other meetings that we held at ISS, which is based in The Hague. That's the International Institute of Social Studies, which is part of Erasmus University Rotterdam. And there we prepared the book. So that's where we had the dialogues, and that's how we wrote up the whole chapters, following feminist methodologies which try to be transparent and open about the processes of knowledge production. So today we're going to focus on 5 chapters and the dialogues in which Augustina, Lillian, and myself were involved. So the first one, no, yeah, go ahead, Augustina. Good guess. Is a dialogue that was looking at meanings and practices of care, and this was an intergenerational conversation with Kayat Fakia, with Kayat and myself, a colleague from South Africa, and written by 3 PhDs who were not here with us, who were let me think, Anna, Malena, and Owen. And these were 3 PhDs from the WeGo project. So it was an intergenerational dialogue, and it really looked at the different ways in which generations understand the ethics and intersectional justice, feminism, and environmental activism. And we discussed that across different contexts in South Africa, Australia, Mexico, and Italy. And we did that not only in terms of activism, but also in terms of our teaching, in particular, how we could teach aware of gender, race, and environmental issues, and the different ways in which we could decenter anthropocentric hierarchies. We also talked about emotions, the grief and fear that we have about what's happening with climate. And we also highlighted the need to understand care as a political practice that could help transform our realities. And the conversation was really about who can care with whom, and what do we care and how do we care. So that was one chapter, very much an open dialogue, intergenerational, with quite different approaches according to context, but also according to age and according to interests. So the next one was about caring communities for radical change. What can feminist political ecology bring to degrowth? This is co-authored by also a whole group of people, of which I was one. And it was actually based on a plenary dialogue which we held. It was on feminist political ecology at the 8th International Degrowth Conference in August 2021. So we were feminists from Europe, Japan, India, and US, and Australia, and we dialogued with and Italy, and we dialogued with the degrowthers, the degrowth movement, really trying to understand how we could bring feminist ideas, our ideas of care and caring communities, into the wider social inequalities that degrowth looks at, and bringing in particularly the structural, racial, and gender concerns, which we felt that degrowth movement doesn't always take into account. So it was a fascinating dialogue, which we then spent quite a bit of time writing up, where we tried to reflect on, of course, issues of paid and unpaid work, and collective versus individual care work, but most of all, why care has to be at the center, understood as social and ecological reproduction, if you are to find a degrowth or post-growth future. So that was that chapter. And then the last chapter I'm going to speak to is about population. This was a dialogue based really on a very personal, I would say, political dialogue I had with one of my PhDs who was doing the WeGo, who was involved in the WeGo project. We both had quite different points of view about population, so it's a real dialogue of difference. But it was also one to look at how you could, as feminists, look at population growth and environment and reproductive rights. In particular, we're reflecting on the science and technology studies scholar Donna Haraway's controversial call to make kin, not babies. And we looked at the explosive and emotional reactions that many feminists have had to Haraway's proposal. And we, at the same time, took that as a starting point to look at racism, discrimination, and the lack of historical awareness in population environmental debates. We didn't arrive at the question of whether we should make kin, not babies. We were very aware of our own situation and that we are both mothers, both living in Europe. But we were arguing that feminists should look at the population debate as part of ecological concerns about the planet, as well as feminists aware of the need, your body, your choice, and to be aware of how population is still a deeply coercive and difficult topic. So those were the 3 chapters that I was involved in, as well as the editorial, which I haven't gone into. I do invite you to have a look at the chapters. Now I'm going to ask my fellow colleagues, my fellow writers here, Lillian, to speak about her work, and then Augustina will follow. And if there's time, I'll say a few words just at the end about where the book has ended up. So, Lillian, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Hello, everyone. I'm Lilian. I'm very excited of being here. I hope you get excited about new ways of writing, new theories, and that you try to use that in your own work, in your studies, your thesis, whatever you are doing. So I'm going to be presenting chapter 11 of the book. It is called La Mercadita 2050, Telling Tomorrows of a Market After Oil. During my presentation, I will be jumping in and out from my chapter so you can get to know what I did. So instead of just telling you, I can show you what happened there. So I'm going to start with that. Let's see. I couldn't stop thinking, you are late again, Carmen. The clouds are gray. It is going to rain. You forgot to close the dome of the market's milpa, and your compañeras need your fingerprint to close it. Some raindrops might slash down onto the hanging pots, and the crops are not used to the rainwater anymore. The milpa might not survive. Focus, focus. Don't stress. You are 3 minutes away. Arriving at the market, I could see the 11 letters above the entrance, La Mercadita, glowing brightly. Next to it, there were the sleek, vertical touchscreens for self-ordering in any language, including the 68 indigenous languages spoken in Mexico. The huge automatic doors opened as I went in, and a cool breeze brushed across my copper-skinned face. Looking around, I could see was a crowd of people shouting and shoving. Apart from our regular visitors, there were holograms and people with spandex suits walking through the corridors that divide and organize the market in an early, perfect grid. They were taking photos as fast as they could, interrupting the ones who were purchasing items or bartering. The actions of these unusual visitors were almost robotic, smiling, picking up the item, taking a photo, and always applauding after a vendor shouted, "¿Qué va a llevar, marchanta?" Walking through the main hall, I could smell papayas and oranges, which tempted me to slow my pace. Instead, I said good morning and rushed, returning to my mission. I crossed the communal kitchen and ran into the shared utility room where I finally reached the controls to close the dome. Once the milpa was protected, I took a step backward and focused on the large group that was walking towards one of the stalls. It was a vegetable stall in which a mestiza woman like me was packing a bunch of limes under the lamplight, asking questions about kilos and products. I noticed a peculiar tone of voice coming from the center of the group. There he was, Professor Karkar Soler, the most famous influencer scholar, giving a live presentation of La Mercadita. So, La Mercadita is a story based on 4 fictional stories created by 16 market vendors in Mexico City. The stories explore the future of the marketplaces and the energy systems that power them. Despite being fictional and in a future, which is 2050, the stories are rooted in the everyday lives of these markets, the communities, the people that visit them. The stories emerged during my fieldwork in 2020. However, my relationship with these spaces and the vendors started way before then. When I decided to create stories, I wanted to challenge, as a feminist, I wanted to challenge dominant narratives about energy futures. As you might know, energy futures are shaped by policymakers and technocrats, and they heavily rely on models and quantitative analysis. In my case, I wanted to center my research on people's voices and their visions, and not like everyone, but specifically working class women. I wanted to talk about their dreams and fears, and I also want to use our base practices. By doing this, I wanted to resist hierarchical notions of what is knowledge, what is not, who is an expert, who is not, what is real, what is fiction, what comes from the mind, what comes from the emotions, from the body. But I also wanted to be emphatic that the stories are just one story of many possible futures. And that means that we have to resist the single stories or the dominant stories, or closing down the possibilities in them. How is it that I create the 4 stories were created? Well, I created a WhatsApp game that was called Tell Me an Unfortunate Story. And I'm gonna read to you now the instructions. So for you to know more or less how was the dynamic during the game. You are members of a team of 4 people who will tell us an unfortunate story. The objective of the activity is to create a story collectively about the future of municipal public markets and their energy systems. Each person will be a single element of the story. You can be the main character or characters, the place where the story takes place, the actions that the character performs, and their emotions and moods. I will go from one participant to another, and in each turn, the participant has to add a bit to the collective story according to her corresponding story element. In total, there will be 3 rounds. I will begin the story by time traveling with you. You will continue creating the story with the help of some questions and sentences. Were the instructions not completely clear? Don't worry. During the activity, your doubts will be solved. However, if you still have doubts, do not hesitate to communicate them. The only rules are that 1, the main character or characters must stay alive, and 2, you need to answer to my message with the questions and sentences that same day or the following. I will write down the main ideas and send them to the next participant to read what has been said. Okay, so first we have the 4 stories and why I wanted to create them. And then how is it that I wrote chapter 11, which is one story written by me. I use the stories of the vendors, but I made my own story. I use a specific method that is called the fictionalizing process. It was created or explained by Levy, and you can find it in Levy 2017. And basically has 4 steps. First one is you select the main themes and elements on the stories. And in particular, the ones that are pointing to alternative futures. Second, you combine and reorganize the elements as if the future imagined are real. The idea is that you're going to tell the story of that place, not assuming, but making it real. Like if in a simulacrum, I don't know if you have been in a simulacrum for earthquakes or fire, but the idea is that you live imagine that you are living that moment to learn from it. So where to go, how to walk, where are the exit and stuff like that. That was the idea. That's the second step. Third, you have to create characters, places, and situations based on what was already in the vendors. So I was not just creating things from nowhere. It was based on what it was on the stories, also about the context, because this happened during COVID-19. So what was happening, what was being said during that moment, but also about my observations and experiences at the markets. Because as I said before, this was not just one time. It has been a long process of getting to know the markets, experiencing the same with the vendors. And finally, to make sure that people would identify what was based on the stories, what was based in literature, and what was based on my imagination, I use citations. So you can see in the story, as in any academic text, a parenthesis saying this is based on an interview, this is based on a story, this is based on this book or this article. And I'm gonna read another piece before I close my participation, which is the last part of the story. We also consider other things that were shared by the markets we visited. In Mercado San Jose, vendors told us that they were using so many emerging technologies that the high energy demand did not fear their energy systems. Thus, they needed to install a complex hybrid renewable energy system to meet their energy needs. When we asked ourselves if we could run La Mercadita on energy technologies such as hydroelectric dams, wind turbines, and similar, we said no. I glanced at the audience who were looking at me with confused expressions. After many years of pushing states to support the goal of 100 renewable energy technologies, what I just shared sounded completely contradictory to them. I took a deep breath. Please don't look at me like that. Of course, we also wanted to get rid of fossil fuels, protect the environment, and have energy free of charge or at low cost. But at the same time, we wondered which type of energy systems we needed, for what and for whom. We wanted to make a decision that was centered on us, the complete market and every stall, not just on energy technologies. So we gathered in vendors' assemblies to decide what we wanted. Just like other markets, we learned that alliances were necessary to achieve our goals. The majority didn't want a third party to control and produce energy and agreed that we couldn't do everything by ourselves with little resources. Therefore, we achieved this, but with the support of others. We wanted to collaborate with people and institutions that supported our journey and who acknowledged that energy needs and interests are only known by us, the vendors. We didn't and do not want any more lies, empty words or random ideas. With this, I mean that there is no room for those who want to replace the marketplaces with supermarkets or gourmet markets. Neither is there room for alliances that want to renew the marketplaces but displace the vendors, or alliances that don't recognize, revalue, improve, and protect our markets. So I will kindly ask you, Car to leave La Mercadita. I have had enough of your behavior, which sadly inhibit our collective ways of flourishing. I said while opening up my arms, as if I was grabbing the audience and the vendors in a hug, making the we gesture. For the rest of you, please stay as long as you want. I hope you enjoy our story and that you will be back soon to see what other things are we creating here. Or even better, to join us in making La Mercadita into what we have dreamt. Have a wonderful rest of the day, I said, smiling, before heading towards the flourishing veggies under the dome. It was time to go back to work. So as you could with these little pieces, I think you can notice that what vendors imagine is there. They imagine themselves having a better future for them, but for others like them. For people that are willing to contribute, they are very clear that people that are not part of this collective idea are not welcome. They are also very clear that it's not about energy technologies. It's not the only thing. They have way more questions: for whom, for what. They also realize that the ones that know their needs is them, is no one else but them. They also talk about production and reproduction. They talk about care in markets. They talk about self-government. So they also challenge the idea of how energy is not just the technologies, but also how energy is governed, which is very alternative in the context of today and fossil fuels. They also talk about decision-making processes that are horizontal, that are participatory, that are collective, that are distributed. Energy technology is not just being a thing that kills, but also that can regenerate life. So you also, in the stories, you see a lot of discussion of how energy can also be used to face floods, for instance, or how energy can help to have rainwater harvesting systems so that water scarcity is not faced because Mexico City is a water scarce city. So there are things also of this connection. And then finally, what they did very well is that they put themselves at the center and they make the energy system visible by showing the role of energy in our daily lives, in our relationship and our communities. So we took from this idea of energy is out there and they put it there and they start discussing around tools, technologies, systems, uses and and possibilities of changing those from now to the future. I think that's all for me. I'm gonna let Agustina to present her book chapter. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lilian. Okay, so let me begin. I'm presenting now chapter 12 of this book, which is called The Territory of Our Body, a conversation on urban environments in the Andes and their bodies. So to begin, this chapter emerges in a particular context. In 2022, I started working with Wendy in the ISS in a project called the Prince Claus Chair, based in the ISS in the city of The Hague, reflecting issues of care and bringing conversations of feminism, feminist political ecology, anti-coloniality, putting them into dialogue. So I contribute to this project from my experience in decoloniality within the framework of Latin American critical epistemologies. And I contribute as well from my experience working with indigenous communities in Andean Patagonia in Argentina. So within the context of this PCC project, that we were willing to establish dialogues and to wave dialogues of knowledge with some other academic spaces and extra academic spaces that were also thinking about care, community, and gender issues. So the first activity, the first of many activities within this project were based on the articulation and the continuation of the debates that WIGO were having. So in this framework, I participated in different activities, as Wendy already said, in the labs, for instance, that were part of this final stage of WIGO. And one of these activities was writing this book. So I co-wrote this chapter with Mariana Ortecho, who is a researcher in Argentina, in the National Research Council of Argentina, that is known as CONICET. Mariana was my supervisor, was the supervisor of my PhD that I did in Argentina. and well, a researcher with whom I worked for many years when I was living in Argentina. Maybe I can say it now. I'm living in the Netherlands and I'm working here. So also this chapter was part of the transition, my transition, and the buildings that I was building between the bridges that I was building between Argentina and the Netherlands. And also in this chapter, we narrate precisely the search to build these bridges between decoloniality and feminist political ecology, as well as the Andean world, the knowledge that comes from ways of knowing otherwise. Especially it comes from my personal desire to bring some of the debates or the ideas that and the problematizations that I learned from the decolonial perspective during my time in Argentina, from the perspective of decoloniality from Latin America, and as I said, in this process of transitioning to academia from the global south to the global north. So maybe I can highlight like 3 key issues that I found on the book chapter, or that I was willing to share with you about this book chapter. So the first key issue was the idea of conversation, which is central in all the book, and it was also central for in our book chapter. Conversation as a way of generating knowledge. This idea of conversation for us goes beyond the mere format of choosing one format to share our reflections, but it's linked to our epistemic position. This choice comes from our belief that knowledge is generated through dialogue among different authors, perspectives, the traditions of thought, and a conversation over time. So the format of conversation allowed us to present our perspectives and ideas as part of this reflective journey, a journey that is in motion, rather than a fixed statement or a fixed argument that we need to refute or to defend within the limits of fixed disciplines. So yeah, I think this is also connected to the argument of the book that doesn't want to define or delimit specific understandings of feminist political ecology, but to bring a series of perspectives um, and conversations as well, yeah, in relation, of course, to the conversations that happened at WeGo, and always in relation to the social and ecological crisis. So the second key issue that I found was our concern that knowledge needs to be rethought. The central idea of this conversation comes from this problematization of what can be called as knowledge. This is also this also connects to this idea that to face the current crisis, the social environmental crisis or civilizational crisis, as we call it from the colonial perspective, knowledge needs to be rethought. So this search to reformulate the idea of knowledge means, at least from a decolonial perspective, to open and to endow new meanings based on the plurality of perspectives of the world. So the concern of our conversation, this conversation in particular, was what can be learned from the ways of being, of doing, and of knowing otherwise. And by otherwise, I mean all those ways of relating, of doing, and knowing that have been classified as otherwise by one particular rationality. So in this particular chapter, our question was, what can be learned from the Andean horizon? And this led me to the last key issue that I want to share with you about this chapter, which is, well, understandings of the body and the territory otherwise. These ideas, otherwise, that we bring to the conversation come from the exercise of opening to the Andean horizon, to the Andean cultural horizon. They come from this exercise of letting ourselves to be taught. In this chapter, we bring different stories that give an idea. It's not conceptualizing, of course. We are not trying to conceptualize body and territory otherwise, but it's giving an idea of another way of understanding and sensing the relations between the natural and the social world. So through these stories, we expose these marks from the Andean world that constitute like a cultural heritage. This cultural heritage that we believe that teach us, that shows us a particular way of being in the world, a particular way of relating, and that may provide key elements for possible answers to the current social and environmental crisis. So opening to the Andean world implies that we are willing to let ourselves be taught. And this means the willingness to move away from a relational position of domination, of appropriation, from an arrogance way of understanding knowledge over what we want to know. And it implies opening to a deep dimension from a perceptual plane that, of course, we believe exceeds the possibilities of rational evocation. So, listening to the Andean worldview requires to open to new meanings, such as fundamental concepts like the body, the territory, the cosmos, the sidereal space, or any other concept in relation to the space. For example, in the framework of Western culture, the notion of body is restricted to a physical and an individual dimension. This conception is opposed and is irreconcilable with the Andean one that understands the body as a manifestation that goes beyond, that exceeds this physical material dimension, and that is not restricted to the domain of the individual, but it's in complex connection with others. So these considerations defines notions of body, of territory, and all these spatial dimensions as clearly different from the ways that we understand them from Western modern rationality. Okay, I think that's it. I have many, some other examples, but I think I would like to give some time for the conversation, so I will end up here.
Thank you so much, both Lillian and Augustina. Just to underline that they gave examples of how feminist political ecology works even if they're not going to be calling themselves feminist political ecologists as such, but in contributing to the book, you can see they're really using storytelling, they're listening and learning from the otherwise, because to some extent, women working in markets in Mexico City and are marginalized and not seen as central to energy futures. And they use creativity that was also using, of course, economic, technical expertise, but humbly, so they could listen and be open to other ways of seeing, other sorts of imaginations and other sorts of knowledges. So I hope you enjoyed those examples. We now would like to open the floor for people who would like to ask questions or maybe also share what we said maybe triggered in you, like what sorts of stories are you involved in telling as feminists? How do you see the environment? How do you understand care? How do you think about decoloniality? How do you think about futures? We threw a lot at you, so we're hoping we can have a good conversation. And maybe, Augustina, we can you could stop sharing so we can maybe see a few more faces if people have.
Thank you so much, really, to the three of you. And as I also written in the chat, if there are questions, just write your name in the chat. And I already see the face of Chiara Saponaro, so I wonder whether Chiara wants to start asking a question to Wendy or to Linian and Agostino. Chiara Saponaro is just starting a PhD in gender studies, so she's with us since 2 weeks. So you're welcome, Chiara.
So I would like to thank you also, Marcella Corsi, because I had the opportunity to discover this book actually a few days ago. And although I didn't have the chance to read it all, I was very captivated by it. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to you and all the authors for your ability to foster this open space for reflection and self-reflection. I mean, both beyond the academic space and within, illuminating diverse perspective. And at the same time, a clear common ground emerged, the need for a relational ontology, the importance of intersectionality and the interdisciplinarity in shaping a fair future from an environmental and social perspective. And if we acknowledge that the climate environmental crisis, like discrimination based on class, caste, gender, and other factors, is a crucial issue of our time, and that the solution lies in dismantling a certain economy, productive and social paradigm in favor of a more just society that cares for nature, land, waters, forests, people, I mean, short life. My question is, in your opinion, how can these ideas, this experience, this conversation, this care movement, or the book called them like care communities, complement each other and translate into transnational collective actions and political counter-hegemonies? I mean, my concern is that this crucial discussion may remain limited to movements or elitist academies debates or localized practices and never translated into collective international policies. Thank you.
Thank you. So
thank you. Can we answer, or do you want to wait for a few minutes?
I would like to know whether some of our PhD students have any other comment about this or question for you, so then I will give you back the floor. I'm talking to Juliana, to Mattia. Yeah, Juliana has a question. Juliana is Brazilian at the moment. She's doing a PhD in gender studies with us. And at the moment she's doing her period abroad in Lille, in France. Please, Juliana.
Hello, thank you. Please don't pay attention. I have a shower in my room, so it's weird, but now I was interested in what Augustina was saying about knowledge, what's knowledge, and the new concept of knowledge, and who knows. And I was relating that to care. So how this concept, like who knows how to care, and if that's with a lens, like a gender lens, how in your work do you see this this new translation of this new kind of knowledge related to care and related to gender, with bodies that are not restricted, like you said, to one individual or territory, so also the body and the whole environment. So who is responsible of transmitting this knowledge, and how, and with the gender perspective, if there is some division of care or if not, if we all should take it into our hands. How is that? It wasn't just very clear. I just wanted to learn more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. So last chance before I give back the floor to the speakers. Any other comment or question? I wonder whether Mattia has a question. No, I don't see any hand raised. So I just add to this that I really appreciated the idea of conversation that brought me back to the conversation or illustrations actually of political economy by Harriet Martineau in the 19th century. So I wonder whether we can establish somehow a historical bridge between this form of dissemination of economic ideas of the classical authors and the need of redefining or better establishing an alternative paradigm, a feminist economic paradigm as an alternative to the mainstream economic ones. So I know it's a very big question, but I would like to know whether you have any additional comments about this, really in terms of pedagogy, feminist pedagogy on the one hand, and new ways really of introducing the economic debate even in our own lives. That's all.
I also see we now have a really interesting question that links with yours in the chat, which I appreciate, from Alberta.
Yes, Alberta is in Argentina. She cannot open the microphone. Okay, congratulations from all of us. Alberta is at the University of Quilmes. We have a cooperation with them. We also carried out a feminist school in Buenos Aires together with them. Anyway, for those of you who cannot read the chat, I just say that she's particularly interested in how we can articulate an ecological perspective and care from feminism and in particular from the Global South. She agrees that one of the most urgent points is the revision of the concept of work and of the economy in general. That would be necessary to think about the growth. However, she wonders how to install this topic, especially the growth, in our feminist agendas, and in particular in the Global South, and even more so at the time of increasing conservative liberal policies. Well, we know what's happening in Argentina, but by the way, our president was there, Meloni and May was very strict in, touching each other and kissing each other on the balcony of the of the Casa Rosada. So anyway, yeah, so I apologize. What is the role of public policies and so on? So quite a lot of issues. We don't have the time to discuss all of this. Just try to bring us back to the book and close this seminar. Very interesting. We will need at least probably 3 hours to discuss all these topics, but thank you so much, really, to all of you. Wendy, Christina and Lilian, it's up to you.
Okay, I can probably tackle the questions, and maybe Augustina comes in also on decoloniality and care. I think, thank you very much for the questions, all very valid. And I think that there are a lot of networks, counter-hegemonic networks, that are trying to engage as care communities. We've talked about the degrowth movement, but there's also agroecology. There's also sexual health, the reproductive rights movements. There are the what I call meshworks that move in and out of UN arenas, which I've also done myself for many years. So I think to keep up some radical hope in times which are very difficult, I think we're also maybe radical vulnerability than radical hope. I don't know. I think we have a moment now where these local encounters, and we can do it through internet, I guess. We hope we can still do that freely. we are there. I wouldn't give up the idea that they're not influencing international policy. I think that there are spaces, there are cracks, and that's where we can bring these sorts of concerns in. And that to me is very much the work of what feminists are doing. And most of all, inviting also people into feminist spaces. So in that sense, it's not just about feminists, just briefly, just sort of saying us feminists, whatever, even though I know there are many diverse forms of feminism. I think it's also important that we bring people into our spaces and see how we work, and their care is very crucial. Care being a very political, very slippery term in a way, but something that for me, if you're really showing care with others, which includes ability to reciprocate care and to see care as not just as a thing that you do to others, but with others, then including it's not just a women's task, it's also a men's task, then we can find ways through, because otherwise we could be giving up tomorrow, I think. And I think I really like Marcella's comment about being in dialogue with the classical economists. I, as you know, Marcella, have tried to do that in many ways. I think you also have as well. But for me, bringing in the ecological concerns as well as the feminist concerns, and rethinking care work and rethinking care for the environment and rethinking how we should be valuing something other than growth is maybe one of the most powerful things we can be doing. And that's where I think degrowth indeed is one of the agendas we can engage with. And I think Global South, there is a lot of people engaging with it. I was thinking of Miriam Lang and Corinne Dengler's work based on work in Ecuador. There is a lot there, and I'd be happy to share it with you. But I think it's, for me, I agree that the dilemma is that mainstream politics is getting more right-wing, more disturbing. But that doesn't mean we give up. I mean, that means that we keep fighting. We resist with this radical vulnerability. We resist. And I think that that's also something you can see in these creative methodologies, different ways of producing knowledge, learning from other cosmologies, but also learning from the technologies we have. I don't think we all can be working with indigenous peoples, but we all are working. What Lillian did was use WhatsApp in COVID, where she couldn't do other things. And that is sort of that creativity with the technologies that we have. I think that we're all definitely trying to move towards a sustainability of life, and valuing care for me is how to do it. And I think feminists have a lot to say about that from many angles. So that's what I would quickly add, knowing that of time. But yes, a big discussion, and thank you very much for inviting us into it. Augustina, did you want to add just briefly on decolonizing care, because that was aimed at you?
Okay, maybe I can add something. Maybe I can more focus on the idea of knowledge and I think making this conversation between feminist political ecology and decolonial thinking, I think they both share these struggles against inequalities, injustice, degradation, exploitation, and planetary destruction. And they both look for or search for transformations and in dialogue as well with voices in the margins, outside academia, as a political project, as a way to move forward. So the idea of knowledge here, or at least the contribution of the coloniality here, is that is also questioning why one way of understanding, of relating and producing meaning about these experiences is considered real knowledge. So only one perspective is considered true knowledge. So we acknowledge that there are plural ways of relating to nature, of being in a territory, plural ways of knowing, and yet there is only one perspective of knowledge that remains the only perspective that is assumed to be rational, right? So that is Western rationality. So in relation to who knows how to care, we know that there are many different experiences about what is care, how do we relate otherwise, and by this I mean in another way that is not based on exploitation and domination of the other. But all these ways of relating or understanding relational dynamics are remain in the margins. So I think the proposal is to open the space for all these experiences to emerge. Maybe that's what I can add, if I made myself clear.
Thank you, Agustina. I don't know whether Lilian wants to add something. Otherwise, unfortunately, our time runs quickly and we have to close.
Yeah, it's just something about politics and letting, as Agustina was saying, other ways of knowing. I will invite people also to think of other ways of doing politics and really think outside the state. We are like, when we think about power, when we think about how to translate what we've seen in the ground, is not, and it doesn't have to go through the state. It doesn't have to be translated in policies. And I think what we try also to do here when we were presenting this book, there are other ways of organizing, and one is based on dialogue, on listening. It's not just about speaking, it's also about listening, sometimes being quiet, sometimes letting others to speak. So yeah, I just wanted to finish with that, because I think it's also an invitation of go out the, I would say, get out of the lines in the drawing, paint outside, and try also to experiment with that. Think about other ways of organizing and creating rules, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, really. And please, let's keep in touch. I'm pretty sure this conversation can go on and on among us. So I know already that Wendy is preparing another book on care that I'm really waiting for. And quite soon you will see the list of the new seminars, new Minerva Lab seminars for the first 6 months of 2025. Please join us whenever you want. Just write to me and I will send you the link. We are a community. We believe in the strength of building a new future for all of us together. Thank you so much and have a nice evening. Bye.